laundry in the picture? Nope. It has been some time since I have made a video. The few people that do watch me probably thought that I was done. No. So here I am with a cup of tea. We're gonna have a little chat, or rather I'm just gonna talk. As you can tell, or maybe not tell, I am back in Estonia. I've been back now for almost a month, and I thought it'd be interesting to make a video about 10 things that differ between the US and Estonia. And since I've been living here for, I've been living here now for over 4 years, I think. I've accumulated lots and lots of things that are different between the two countries. Thing being language. Now I know what you're thinking. Language, no duh. But when I say the two languages, English and Estonian, when I say they're different, I mean they are different. So English is a Germanic language, and Estonian is a Finno-Ugric, I can never say that right, Finno-Ugric language, and which includes a lot of languages. It includes Swedish, English, Norwegian, Frisian, Afrikaans, a lot of languages. And the Finno-Ugric, it does include a lot of smaller languages, but the main three languages are Finnish, Hungarian, and Estonian. And there are barely, if none, a few crossovers between the two languages. The differences in structure, pronunciation, everything. Black and white difference. And sure, I was born in Estonia, but learning Estonian for me was almost like learning it just from scratch. While I do have some of the pronunciation from when I was a baby, or a child, not a baby, it was still very difficult because there's the way we pronounce the words in Estonian it was just mind-blowing learning the language, and it was rough. And it still is. It still is to this day. It still is. I think the second major thing is the fact that if you take, I think, the population of the US and you asked if they were more extroverted or introverted, I believe most people would say extroverted. And I think as a nation, most Americans are quite extroverted, quite out there, their personalities are quite big. Not to say that that's everyone, but a lot of people are, me included. I have quite the big personality. However, Estonians are the exact opposite. Much more quiet, much more reserved, much more introverted in general. And again, not saying this in a bad way. I love it, actually. It's a really nice contrast between the US and here. People are much more humble, much more modest. And it's not to say that people don't have big personalities. It just takes a while for you to get to know them. And it's not, I feel like Americans are much more outwardly with their personality right away. And with Estonians, they don't show it as much in public, just to random strangers. In the US, you'll smile at someone down the street you don't even know, you know? Here, people don't just smile at random strangers, really. It's weird. And when you think about it, kind of is a bit weird. I remember when I first moved here, and when I first moved here, I would walk down the street and kind of smile at people, and the looks I got were like, what the hell are you doing? You know? And at first it was just like a culture shock to me, but it's just something different. Just something different. I find it annoying when I go back home and everyone's smiling at me, and it's just like, you don't know me. You don't know me. I forgot the third thing. Let's jump to something a little more serious, I guess, or a deeper topic. Healthcare. Next two things are actually kind of one thing, but they're separate, but I'll count them as two separate things. It's the healthcare and education. Now, they're not free, quote unquote, because you're paying them with your taxes, but when you go to university here, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. No tuition, of course, if you're studying in Estonian. Of course, that comes out of taxes, but you're not paying separately. Like in the US, you get money taken out of your paycheck, but then you also have to pay for school, which is, let's say, what, 60, 70,000 a year, and that's a small number. And healthcare as well, not free, comes out of your paycheck, but you don't have to pay extra per se. In some aspects you do, like with dentists, and medication you still have to pay for, but it's quite a low fee for medication. And in the US you have this thing called copay, where you even if you have insurance, you have to, depending on the insurance you have to pay a small amount when you go get a checkup. When I go there, the copay is around $35, which may not sound like a lot, but that's a lot, and that's with really good insurance. But here, most of the time, sometimes I think I haven't even had to pay. It's called the visitaso, and it's only €5. 35? 5. In the US, you pay the 35, and then there's just always surprise bills, always surprise payments that you have to pay. Always. And medication, it's just, I'll never understand. Or when I went to the emergency room for the first time here, I was so terrified thinking, how much is this going to cost me? I don't have the money for this. I paid €5. €5. I still can't get, I've been living here for 4 years and I still can't get over that. I feel like people in Estonia take that for granted, but please, to anyone watching this as Estonian, you have it so good here. And I'm so glad that I can be a part of that. Because when I go home, it just hurts me to see people drowning in student loans and medical bills. Things. Now the fifth one, kind of a smaller thing, but actually quite a big deal, sidewalks. Now I know some of these things on this list are not just specific to Estonia, it's a lot of countries in the EU. But in the US, especially where I live, I don't know how it is exactly all over the rest of the United States, but where I live in the Midwest, finding sidewalks is like finding a needle in a haystack. It is so hard. And the concept of just walking to the store or anywhere is so foreign. If you see people walking on the street with grocery bags, you probably think that they're very poor, they don't have money to have a car or anything. Here, almost everybody, walks to the store, walks to the doctor, to work. I mean, people have cars here, but the concept of walking is so normal. I feel like in the US, if people go on a walk, it's specifically as a form of exercise. You're going to work out. Whenever they had just built this sidewalk by my house, like in a different neighborhood, and they built it, and then it just stops in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't continue on, it just stops. It's so illogical. It's like they attempted to build a sidewalk and then they just stop it in the middle of nowhere. Like, they don't go anywhere. Here, you can get places, In the US, you have to have a car to get anywhere. And that leads me to the next thing, which is public transportation. Also, don't know if this is specific to the whole US. I don't think so. I think just with where I live, in certain areas, because I know in New York, transportation's a big thing, public transportation. But where I live in the Midwest, taking the bus, again, is kind of has a negative connotation. If you're riding the bus, you probably are poor, can't afford a car, just not very well off, or you're homeless or something like that. However, here, everyone rides the bus. Business people, kids, university students, old people, everyone. And the bus system is very good. I know Estonians probably beg to differ, but you usually have buses like every 10 minutes. Where I come from, I remember when I had to get to work, because I didn't drive, I would have to take a bus 2 hours before my shift started. 2 hours before my shift started, so I could get there on time. Next thing, small talk. I love this topic because it's such an interesting concept to me, because I didn't notice it as much until I moved here. In the US, we are famous for our small talk. And, someone in the store, the cashier will say, "Oh, how are you?" And you respond, "I'm fine." End of discussion. Never really thought of anything of it when I lived in the US, but the more I live here now, I'm realizing how empty these like conversations are. The cashier who asks you, "How are you?" she doesn't care. about what your answer is. But it's just like a dialogue, or like a social norm. Because if you don't say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" it feels very awkward and strange. But it's not about the response, it's just about this kind of society, this societal norm. But now that I've lived here for 4 years, and when I go back, it's so odd for me to say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" "Oh, I'm good," but knowing the other person doesn't give a damn. Like, I usually just don't answer anymore, and I can feel that there's like this tension, but it just seems so ingenuine to me. And I understand it's just a cultural difference, but like when you actually think back, or look at it objectively, it's really empty. And I feel Estonians don't really engage in that kind of thing. When you go to the store, they just say hi, move on, you pay for your stuff, you leave. And there's none of this empty, filling conversation. Estonians here, it's like, if they're going to ask you, "How are you?" it's not going to be a stranger for one, but if they ask you, "How are you?" they're going to expect an answer, you know? And if they don't want to know, they're not going to ask, you know? But I feel like in the US, it's just like this automatic thing. The next thing, very little thing, and again, not specific to Estonia, I don't believe. I don't know. But the tax is already included in the prices of things. And it may seem like a very little thing, but having the price, or having the tax already in the price, makes shopping so much easier, because there's no like, "Oh, surprise, it's actually an extra 10% more, extra few dollars." And again, it doesn't seem that important, but it throws you off. And whenever I go back to the States now, I'll be buying things and then paying, and I'll be calculating in my head, and then I'm always off. And it's always like $3-4 more than what I expect. And it gets aggravating, because here it's just, you add it up, you know how much you're going to pay. There's no surprise tax or anything. It just makes sense to put it in the tax. Why? Why would it just be a surprise later? Why can't you just put it in the price already? I think a lot of people know this, and again, not specific to Estonia. But in the winter, the sun goes down peak time when it's like early winter, or like about middle of the winter. It goes down around 2-3 o'clock. Yes. The sun is already down at 2-3 o'clock, and it doesn't come up until around 9 in the morning. So you're basically barely getting any light. And during that moment where it is light, the sun's usually not out, and it's cloudy and gray. I love it. People can't understand why, but there's something about the gloom that makes it just so cozy, and I don't know, just cozy and protective and warm for me. I love the darkness. So a lot of people hate it. But then in contrast, in the summer, the sun comes up around 3-4 in the morning, and it doesn't really ever set per se. So even at around 11 o'clock at night, it's still kind of twilight. And so there's a nice contrast. So you get that gloom in the winter, but then in the summer, you're basically living in daylight. It makes you feel like when you're out, you know, after dinner, you feel like you could be outside for like 4 or 5 more hours, because you feel like you have all the energy because the sun's like still up. And it just kind of feels like it's a never-ending day. And it's really nice, because you can go on long walks, and the sky is still lit up, and it's a really beautiful contrast. And the last one, it's kind of my favorite one. I have to use my laptop. And it's this nature preservation, and this idea that nature is for everybody. And I just want to read, yesterday I went to a marsh. I think that's the best word in English to call it. In Estonian, they have many different names. Yesterday I finally went to my first few, and there was a sign on the trail, and I'm going to read it here. I loved it so much. It says, "Dear visitor, it depends on you whether nature is preserved for future generations. Estonian nature is a public asset, which everyone has a right to access. All rights and obligations which bind people to nature are jointly referred to as the freedom to roam. This constitutes ethical beliefs that are based on both laws and customs and were valued already by our ancestors. Enjoy the beautiful surroundings, listen to the sounds of the bog, marsh, and savor the presence of the macrocosm. Didn't read that far yesterday. Wow. And the reason I bring this up is because The reason I bring this up is because in the US, again, this is something I noticed later when I'd lived here already for some time, that everything in the US feels like private property. Walking anywhere, you have to be careful because you may be on someone's land, just on something owned by the government, and you're always in fear that you're breaking some kind of law. And there's just constantly signs everywhere, do not trespass, prohibited by the law, fine, like if you step on this property. It's everywhere. I'm not even just exaggerating. Whenever I go home, I'm just amazed at the amount of signs that say, stop, don't go here, don't go here. It's scary. Never noticed this before. But here, in Estonia here, I never feel afraid to walk anywhere. Like I'm gonna step on to some piece of blade of grass that I'm gonna have to pay, $20,000 for. And I just love this idea that nature is for everyone. Saying said it so perfectly, that everyone has the right to nature, everyone has the right to be outside. And that's why I love Estonia so much. And these differences, I'm not trying to bash the US, these things I point out, I feel like are just so significant, and they just kind of make you see things in a different perspective. I want to keep making content. I'm going to pick myself up and make more content, so hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.